No.
No? Okay.
We got stuck on something else.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, all right. So, okay, let's talk about like test-driven development. So, let me just share my screen. Nothing fancy, just a terminal, a Hyper terminal. By the way, I found out today that Hyper app was built in Electron, and so it's like built in JavaScript, and then parts of it are React as well. So it's kind of cool. So anyway, all right. So let's open this up. Not this. Let's open the other thing up. Okay, so just an empty directory. Nothing cool here. All right, so to get started, as with every directory, every app you're going to be building in Node, you need an npm init, right? You need a package.json file. So npm init, and I'm just going to just wave everything and set it to yes. How many of you were where you could do that? It's cool if you did know that. Otherwise, it's, you know, sometimes it takes so long to hit enter a bunch of times. You can just type in -- yes, and it'll go through it. So the packages we're going to need for this, according to what I've been looking at, is we're going to need -- save, and then what I'll do is I'll say body parser, right? We need mongoose. What else do we need? Express, chai, mocha, Xenon, chai, HTTP, Morgan, right? That's the little reporter that Ben talks about all the time. I've never used Morgan before, but I'll give it a whirl tonight. Why not? I understand. So Ben did an entire couple years stint with a company that was building. He was able to work in a Node Mongo environment. Professionally, I've never been able to work in a Node Mongo environment. So his wealth of knowledge is like much deeper than mine. But yeah, I'm going to do my best to just make sure that, you know, everything that's written, it's all JavaScript, right? So we all understand it. It's just out there for us. So everything that we can look for here and parse through together, we can come up with reasons for why the code exists. So okay, so the first thing I want to change is this test file, because we're going to be testing in a Mocha environment, right? So every single time that we run npm test, we're going to say Mocha and set it up to look at our test files. So if I were to do this now, so everything that's, you know, .test, .js, and beyond. So if I were to do this now, it's actually just going to give us an error. So npm test, awesome. As expected, there's no test files. Cool. So we don't have any test files. We have to set up our tests. So anytime that you're creating a test-driven development application, you kind of start with this idea of you know, just getting your environment set up first. So that's what I've done here. I've just created an npm package.json file, use the wonderful npm to install all the packages that I need, and I have my node modules. So and you would obviously do a lot more than this in a production environment. You'd set up a linter. You'd set up some sort of continuous integration testing with like Travis or Circle CI or Jenkins. You know, the wealth of applications for software engineers, or software for software engineers out there is ginormous. There's tons of things that you can use to get a production application out in the wild. So, all right. So, okay, that's all we need to talk about with our package.json. Now, one thing that you're going to, that's part of this lab, was to create some sort of documentation. So I'm going to create a file called API documentation. And we're going to talk about what our API is going to look like. All right. So I'm familiar. I mean, all y'all probably familiar with Markdown. You've used it a lot in Slack to write a code block, right, that contains many lines. So anytime you did the triple tick before and after a code block. That's just, I mean, your Slack can read Markdown. So like italicize something is underscore foo, right? You can italicize it. So by that, I mean, I did underscore. This will be italics. So that's, oh, whoops. I had a tick in there. So it's like, don't do that. I'll just put the ticks in there. So that, you know, anything in the underscores, whatever. So that's Markdown. So I'm just going to use Markdown to build some API documentation. And I won't get too rich here. It's just going to be simple and straightforward. So one thing you can do, you know, your header. So like if I were to render this, you know, documentation, let's see. Can I do this? Just pull it up. I don't know if VS Code lets me do that. But if I were to like push this to GitHub, it would be Markdown. But since we named the file .md, it's just Markdown. So I'm going to say docs for our killer API, right? And then you can start using code blocks to say, you know, what our requests are going to be. So you would have some sort of description maybe. So like our API is built to store users in a database. Cool. That's kind of ubiquitous. It's not really, I mean, not just a store, to work with users, okay? And then you could say, you know, something like the following will be our routes. Shift command plus P, and then select, okay. Markdown preview. Whoa. So open preview is that shift command V. Whoa. It's kind of cool. Nice, good tip. Yeah, preview to the side. Cool. The following will be our routes. Sweet. And then we'll have our routes, right? So I'll have, first thing, we're going to create a CRUD app. So we want to say post to users, okay? And then you could say, okay, and then you could say something like, dude, this is awesome. Bob, ready for the win. Cool. All right, thanks, Bob. And then you could say, we could start defining what our users are going to look like. I won't go too far into this, because I want to get to like the nitty gritty. But yeah, this is what you would define. So you would say a user, so like, yeah, you can use a star. A user will be shaped like the following. And this is how you would write like good documentation, or this is actually pretty crappy documentation, but we won't tell anyone. I mean, this is just like me trying to be really fast with this stuff. So, so like a user object that comes up will be like, we'll have a username and a password, right? Username string, password string. Cool. So this is, dude, this is awesome. So Markdown editor. I'm going to use this for writing documentation from here on out. Well, for writing like, yeah, stuff. Let's see. Okay, break that line. Cool. Yeah, this is fun. This makes it really a lot more entertaining than I've ever written Markdown before. And I bet you there's like a dime a dozen apps out there that'll allow you to do something like this. So, you know, you could then say something like the post, you could say requires you know, body object, right? And that would be this. So this would be more fitting of what we're trying to accomplish here. And actually, I'll bring that back up. Cool. Awesome. Dude, this is great. This is what I love about my job is I learn stuff every day. So there we go. I had a space. Sweet. Yeah, this is sweet. Cool. Right on. that makes my life really easy. Okay, so this is sort of what we wanted you to do with the documentation. So you can get as thorough and rich as this as you need. If the endpoint requires some sort of data to be passed to it, what the endpoint is that you're looking at, and you would do the same for your CRUD operation. So this is create. You would do the same thing for a get, for read, and then for update and delete, right? So, or put and delete or destroy. And so this is how you would start going about this, is defining what your endpoints are, defining what's required to make those endpoints work, and just making sure that users who are going to be interfacing with your API know very, very well what's going on here. So this is a very good start to test-driven development. But we won't come back and refer to this documentation any further on. Although, yeah, we could, but we'll just say for now. So like username would be an example. We could say, Ryan@ryan.com, not my address, and then password is admin123. Also not my password. So cool. Nice. Kind of liked it when it was the other way around, though. It's nice and easy to read. This is great. Good stuff. Okay. Okay, so let's move forward. So what's the next part of this? Well, we need to kind of build a skeleton app. We kind of need to build our endpoints, but not make them work. Just build them so that we have them from scratch, and we can use Mocha and Xenon and things to start testing them. So, all right, so where do we want to go next? Let's build our server file, okay? So the next thing we would need is a server.js file, and just like every node server, we're going to require, every request server, we're going to say express equals require express. And all this does is just pulls in that npm package. So by the time we get to it, we say, const server equals express, and we call that, okay? Then we can say things like server.use and then certain middleware, okay? So I know we're going to use a couple pieces of middleware for this. Let me get out of the docs. Okay, so some of the middleware we're going to use is body parser, okay? Does anyone remember exactly what body parser does? Does anyone want to take a stab at it? So what is body parser actually doing when we use it this way? What are we actually telling our server to do? Yeah, it's middleware, and we're using it to simply tell our server that we expect JSON to come in and JSON to go out. So sort of formatting the type of text that we want coming across. Because remember, HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So hypertext, the first T, is text that comes across the World Wide Web. So it's just sending text, to and from a computer, or vice versa, from or towards a computer. Okay. So yeah, you have two computers communicating through this protocol, and we want that text that they're communicating with to be JSON, right? Okay, and then the other piece of middleware that we need is that logger that's going to log out our every time we hit our endpoint. We're going to call this Morgan will get called anytime there's an HTTP request sent to our endpoint. And yeah, Morgan's just going to be a logger. It's just going to show us, how our stuff's going to be used. And the way to use this middleware is to just pass it through the use statement and say Morgan, and then we call it like a function. Then we use this combine, and it's just going to log out those. Actually, I have no clue actually what this is telling it to do. I'm going to be completely honest here. I'm not even going to guess. I just know that this is what Ben has set up, and from watching the previous solution lecture. And so I want to go and actually research and find out more about what Morgan does. But I need to call it the right thing. So, whoops. Cool. So, yeah, if I went into the package could go to the node. Yeah, it's just a logger middleware. It's exactly what I thought it was. So what's cool, my last company, we built our own logger because Golang, the language, doesn't have any good like error handling or logging. So like we built our own logger. Well, I didn't build it, but yeah, I consumed it all the time. But yeah, a logger is just something that tells us what. So I just went over to these docs right here when I clicked on that link. And it's just saying, you know, it's middleware function given the format and options. The format argument could be a string, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, it's just a logger middleware that helps us get some more richness out of our API. So out of our HTTP request. So anytime an HTTP request is made, it'll log it to the console for us. So I think that's exactly what Combined is doing for us. So cool. That makes more sense. I learned with you guys today. Did you guys already know that? Did Ben already go through this with you? No? Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to make our CRUD app, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to say server.get, and then we're going to say, since we're going to deal with users, we're going to say users here. And then we're going to say, and I'm just going to take this code and make it like boilerplate so that we can come back and reference it later. So I'm just going to say request and response, and I'm just going to say res.send users get, okay? Cool. So that way we can actually reference this code, start writing tests for it. But these are just going to be shells. So the first one we actually want to do is post, right? Because it's going to be our create. So create a user, and then so user post, users get, that'll stay the same. So that's our read, and then user.put is going to be our update. So I'm just going to say create, so we know that it's CRUD, read, update, and then delete. And now delete's going to need some sort of like, you know, parameter, right? Some sort of ID, okay? So that one's going to be delete. So now we just have a simple stub for like a simple like boilerplate logged out for all of our CRUD operations. So we're going to be operating over this stuff, but we haven't built the routes yet. The routes are here for us, but we're just, you know, we're gonna just use these a little bit later. So it's really just like, you know, a quick build out, so then we can start using our tests right away. Okay. So a lot of times this is kind of how things will work. When you're building out an API, you'll kind of just mock up what your API is going to do, and then you can hit these endpoints, and you should get this response back, and just make sure that everything's up and running. Cool. So I'm going to turn off my notifications. Okay. So now I'm silenced, but I can see your Slack open. However, so okay. So now what I want to do is actually just I'm gonna just call. Well, yeah, what I can do is just say module.exports. I'm going to export out this server. Okay. So at the end of it all, I'm just going to export out this server, and I'm going to use it in a new file called app.js or whatever. So just like you've seen in a lot of your sprints, where like you keep your routes, your endpoints in a server file or something, and then you do your connections in like another file. And that way it keeps it pretty clear as to what the concerns are there. So so in here, in this app.js file, we're going to do some Mongoose connecting. So, and then we're also going to do our server.listen, okay? So, all right. So if we're going to Mongoose connect, we need to call Mongoose, right? And then and then we need to import in our server. Okay. Since we exported it out right here, since we exported it out on line 25, we can have access to it right here on line 2. We can pull it into any file that we want to use in our application. All right. Okay, so now in here, what do I need to call to connect to Mongoose? Yeah, so I could call that function create connection, or I could just simply call mongoose.connect. I'm not really sure what the difference is between the two, but this one I know I'm familiar with, so it takes a couple of arguments here. One is just a callback, where if we get an error connecting to it, we can handle that error. Another is a string of where we want to connect. So, okay. And then I'm going to connect to a database called users. Crap. I have a database called users defined already. So, but that's fine, because when I call this, yeah, when I connect it, I'll create a data file. So I'll just say data, and I'm going to make it specific to this directory. Okay, cool. So now with users, okay, so you say your URL. Remember I was talking about HTTP? It's a protocol. MongoD is a daemon server. It's also a protocol. So we're saying here, like, use this protocol, find our local host, connect to users, and then this is where we can specify some options in this object. And then we can also just handle this error that comes out of this callback if we don't connect properly. So I can say if error, return console.log the error, and that'll, yeah, and then I can just say console.log error connecting to Mongo. Or I could just say throw new error, pass it the error. Cool, that works. And then otherwise, cool, we're just, so we're connecting. If there's an error, cool. Otherwise, we're just gonna stay connected. Now, after I connect, what I wanna do is I wanna say server.listen. And this is gonna listen on port whatever we want. So I can just say 3030. I probably have something running on 3030, so I'll do 3031. Cool, and then we'll give it a callback, and we'll just say, console.log server running on 3031. Cool. All right, nothing should be new in this file to you guys. Is anything, everyone, I think at this point you should have, as much as we've seen Mongoose, much as we've seen Mongo, this is what we're gonna have to do. Okay. All right, man, there's just so much to cover. I'm so sorry about this. Okay, so let's make our models. All right, so who can tell me what a model is, just like a high-level view? Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat, but it doesn't look like anyone answered. So who can tell me what a model is? What's a model? Yeah, so I heard a description of the database structure in code, basic structure your database should follow, and then schema. So yes, yes to all those things. A model is a little bit more than just schema. Schema is a part of model, for sure. Yeah, and in Mongoose, it's just a constructor function, right? So all we do, we call new schema, because you see the new keyword here, you should understand this is a constructor. So because of this, we can basically now create a brand new instance of schema and set it equal to user schema, and then use all the methods like .find by ID and remove, .replace, blah, blah, blah. So we can do all these things to, to update, query our database essentially. So yeah, that's what the constructor portion of it is. But yeah, you can think of a model as like schema, and then a way to create a new document in Mongoose. Okay. So when we run this, or when we go over this, we want to say that every single user should have, so every single user schema should have some sort of like username, and that should just be of type string. And you know what? I'm going to make it required so we get some validation out of here. So it's setting up rules for what our data should look like in our database, right? So I'm going to say it's a type string and it is required. Okay, and instead of worrying about a password, I'm just going to do a username so we can be fast and make really stupid schema here. Okay, so I'm going to say now const user equals mongoose.model, pass it a string that we want our collection to be named. So every single user is going to be stored in a collection called users. Okay. All right. And in fact, I'm going to go back here and change what we connect to and call this users DB. Cool. Just so you can see the difference between the two. Then pass it our user schema. Okay, this is going to go, Mongoose is going to go and create this model for us, which is going to be a collection of documents. Okay, so our collection is going to be users. Each document is going to be a single user. So our collection will be users. Each document will be a single user inside of our users-db. Okay, cool. Once again, lots of stuff to set up. And then I'm going to module.exports out this user. Cool. So now once we reference this user in another file, we can just pull it in and reference it. Now Ben brought up something about static methods and methods we can use to test. We'll probably get to those on tomorrow night because I want to get through all of our CRUD stuff tonight. And then we'll test our schema and our methods on our schema tomorrow, if that's okay with everybody. Just to make sure that we get through all of, man, this was such a huge like undertaking. So congrats if you were able to get like a fully tested working API. That's amazing, especially in the time given. Okay. All right, so now we can move into the fun stuff, right? We can actually start building some tests, start hitting our API, start playing around with you know, the meat and potatoes of this sprint, right? So to test this, we're gonna make a test file, right? And we're gonna basically write some tests that allow us to consume our API in a way that, so here's our API, right? So we're gonna consume our API in a way that makes sure we go through all of these functions. So all of these post, get, put, and delete. And then, yeah, and then we can come back and finish these out as we go, as we get everything created. So maybe what I'll do tonight is I'll make sure we have 4 failing test suites, and then by Thursday we can actually come and fill this stuff in and finish it up. We'll see where we're at in about 43 minutes. Okay, so we have a new file here, and I'm just going to call it our api.test.js. Cool. All right, so once again, we're going to need some Mongoose, okay? We're going to need to connect to a test database so that we don't muddy the waters of our actual users database. And we're going to need to mock this the way that it's doing it, okay? So that's kind of what our tests are going to do. They're going to create tests, mocks over our code, and they're going to call our endpoints and make sure that our endpoints do what we expect them to do, okay? And that's really it. At a high level, that's all we're looking for here. So let's get through as many of these as we can in the next 42 minutes. So the first thing I want to do is import Mongoose. Okay. And then we're going to just call right here inline mongoose.connect. And we're going to connect to a new database using MongoDB. Okay, and we're just going to call it test. Cool. We're just going to assume, so like every time that this code gets run, the tests run, we're going to be able to make a connection and then fill up our database and delete it every single time. You know, so we're gonna populate and delete every single time our tests are called. Okay. So we're gonna need to pull in our user model, right? Oh. What did we call it? It's a user model. Need an equal sign. And then we're also going to need to make sure that we have our server here so we can test our server. We can pass our server to, we can pass it to the actual chai HTTP request library. Okay, and then I'm just going to find server. Okay, cool. So yeah, every single time we call our server, we're going to use that chai HTTP request stuff. Okay. Now we need to import in all the packages we're going to need to make this stuff work. So I'm actually going to do that up here. I'm going to just keep all the modules, the node modules that I'm using, up in the same line. I'm going to say const chai. We need chai, right? Whoa, come on. And then we're going to need chai HTTP. That's the package that we're going to use that acts as a request. And you know, I'm actually kind of nervous because I've written a lot of code and I haven't even started my node server or my Mongoose connection yet. So we're going to see how much I can get this done and then just get a test suite up and, you know, skip some tests and watch it go from there. Okay, and then, okay, we need to, I'm going to use expect. Right, it just pull it off of the chai package and use it, so that I kind of like expect more than assert for a lot of things, but I mean it's a matter of preference. And then okay, so now we're gonna say we're gonna tell chai down here. We're gonna say chai.use our chai HTTP. So this use should tell you that chai HTTP is what? Based on like our server file, when we're saying use this stuff, what is our chai HTTP? It's more middleware. Nailed it. All right, so, okay. Now, if everything's up and running the way it should be, I should be able to start using describe. And we're going to build out our test suite. So I'm going to say describe users API. Okay, and we're going to wrap everything in that this giant suite of tests. Okay, and so this users API is going to be all of our tests that we're going to be, you know, using to call. To test our endpoints, okay? All right, this is the point where now I want to actually, I want to try and start my server and run my tests and see if everything's up and running the way it should be. So I'm going to, over in my package.json file, I'm going to write a start command that just simply calls nodemon over our app.js file. Okay? All right. Because that's where we're connecting, right? I'm going to change this to port variable. And I'm going to define port up here. and then we called it 3031 and call it a day. All right. Just if 3031 is not available, we can default to the next environment port. Okay. And then, cool. All right, so let's try and start this bad boy. It's going to tell us we're crashed. This is our error that was thrown, which came from our connection trying to connect to Mongoose. So that's good. That means we hit this error right here. That's fantastic. So I need to call, I need to say sudo mongod and then point the db path to the data directory in my app. Wouldn't you want to see my password? Okay, so now you can see we actually, this is where all of our data is going to be stored, is in this directory. So that's what the db path flag was, is I just specified what's where I wanted my data to be stored as like a local spot. Okay, so now I can say something, or I can do my npm start command, right? And it wants us to use OpenURI, use Mongo client. So I'm going to use that as an option. Cool. Now we get no deprecation warnings. Hey, no errors. Can I get a round of applause? All right, I feel stoked about that. 35 minutes coding straight, maybe a little more, maybe close to 40 minutes. Okay, so Pratik asked if I would add my data folder to the git ignore, but not sure how someone else would know how to run sudo mongo dbpath data before using the app. So normally that's something that's going to be built into your company's protocol. So wherever you go and get a job, you're going to have like a company that says, hey, this is how you're going to store data. And not necessarily you would not check it in unless there's sensitive data in there. But remember, all the data that's going to be stored in this is just going to be stored in binary files. So it's not super easy to read. You can just pull this down and clone it. But a lot of times what you'll do for like testing environments is you will just have like, you know, a data store somewhere living on a server that you can all consume and pull from. And then when that updates, everybody gets those changes. And then you have a whole bunch of corrupt data and you have to migrate, and it's just a pain in the ass. But eventually you get to a point where your company has a protocol and you just follow that protocol. But yeah, for you, committing this to GitHub, I would probably not commit it. You get warning. Okay, that's fine. If you're getting Git warnings, yeah, if it's that big, that's a big database, 100 megs for testing like users and stuff. Which was it one of the projects that we had? I'm wondering if it's like one of Karthik's projects that he has like hundreds of, like the Stack Overflow projects, or one of mine where I populated it with like hundreds of rows of data. I wonder which one would get up to over 100 megs, because they're all just binary files, I thought. So I thought binary is like tiny, tiny, tiny. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so don't commit it. If it's 100 megs, that's, yeah, don't commit something that big. I mean, your node modules themselves should only be like a, you know, I've never even seen node modules get up over a meg. But like, you should never commit your node modules, right? Because you can just pull them down. All right. Error connecting to Mongo. Oh, wow. But I wonder if this is just logging. Thanks, Bear of Bad News, Bear. Yeah. So I had that in the wrong spot. We'll say a console.log. Bob was right. We're connected now. Things are good. Cool. So yeah, that was a positive line that we were getting that positive response. This one right here would have been the negative. If yeah, let's test it. Burp. Failed to connect to server. Error connecting to Mongo. Okay, yeah. So I was doing some bad error handling. It was my bad. Cool. It's up. Cool. We're connected. All right. Server's running. We're good to go. We're groovy. All right. So let's run our tests. All of this so that we could write some tests. Cool. Man, you guys are fantastic. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need out of our tests, so let's just stub out all of our tests real quick. So I'm going to write a different describe for every single one of our tests. And so what I want to do is just get this boilerplate just like I did earlier. So I'm going to say get at users and then boilerplate it up. Oh my gosh. Okay, and since we're using a lot of async code, we're going to use this done function. So this this callback right here that gets called in our describe suite will actually take a done. You can provide a done argument to it that will allow your code to continue to just execute your tests or move on to the next test, regardless of as long as it hits that done. And I think when I was helping y'all out with your delete, this is part of where some of the the corruption was happening. It wasn't working out exactly like it should have been. All right, so this is going to be kind of the meat and potatoes for everything that we do. So I'm just going to copy and paste. And I'm going to say we want to, I always do get first because it's always the easiest, right? So, but I'll just say post, a get, we want to put and delete. Cool. So now if I come out of my, okay, so let's go back into my package JSON and let's make a watch command. And then say, well, let's not do that. Let's just keep it simple because I don't want to look up. I don't want to look it up right now. So I can run npm test. Now we should have 0 test passing. Oh, let's come in here, grab our homie, go into our tests, and where we're connecting, just get rid of that deprecation warning right away. Cool, so if I run npm test again, okay, so 0 passing. Okay, one thing that's cool, and maybe you didn't know this, but you can go ahead and put all your tests into pending mode. So since I'm gonna focus on, I think you can do this with describe. I know you can do it with the it method, so let's check it out. Yeah, skip is better suited for the it methods. So we'll do that as we move along, okay? Okay. All right, so let's write our first post. Well, before this, all right, so did Ben talk to you guys about your TDD better be worth it? Yeah, it is in the long run. And it's, let me just tell you, it's actually a, I mean, TDD is really, really good practices, but is it best practices? That just completely depends on you and your company. So TDD is definitely worth it to know about it because a lot of people use it and it saves a lot of people in the long run, especially if you're working on enterprise software. But Ivan was saying they didn't do TDD. They just barely started getting to TDD at the company he worked for before us. And that was Blizzard, right? So he was at a pretty dang big company. So like it's controversial as far as like whether or not it's best practices, but most definitely it is very common practices. So, all right. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to provide a way to, insert and then delete our data from our data sets. So, yes, that is very true, Bob. And here's the thing, as long as your tests are in production with your code and you have coverage over your code before it goes into production, it doesn't matter when you wrote the test. At my last job, we had an entire Redux React front-end application that needed to be 100% test covered. So that means every single time there was a function written in the code, we had to have a test that looks at that function. And we had an app that would go and look to see if every single line of code was actually covered. So anytime I made a pull request, it would run all of the tests and run coverage. It would look at every single line of code. And yeah, 100% test coverage. I know companies where it's like 80% is fine. But yeah, 100% test coverage was our standard. And so I would get there and I would write a feature for like 3 days, and I'd be working my ass off at getting this feature through the door. And then it's like, oh, I have to write tests for an entire day just for that 3 days of work that I just wrote. So I learned, after my first pull request was respectfully denied, was a good way to put it. I learned very quickly that writing tests, beforehand was a little bit easier. But the 90% of the time, I'd write my feature and then I would get coverage on it, and then I'd write another feature, get coverage on it, submit the pull request. So I was more like not test driven, but like coverage driven for sure. And as long as the coverage was written, in line. So I wasn't TDD, but yeah, that's a very good observation that a lot of people will write the code before they write the test. So, and I'm one of those people. That's just it doesn't. My boss just said it doesn't matter, just as long as you submit the pull request and everything's covered, like you didn't care. Okay. So this is where we're actually going to pull in. We need to use our user up here, and we're going to pull it in our model, right? And we're going to populate our test database, every single time. But we have these hooks from Mocha that we can use to, populate and empty our data set so that's not corrupt when we move on to the next test. So who knows what the name of those hooks are? There are two methods that come with Mocha. Before each is the first one. So I'm going to say, before every single test, we're going to, this one takes a callback. I think they both take a callback, right? What else does it do? Okay, so I'm going to say, I'm going to create a new user. So I'm going to say const new user equals new user. And we need to pass that new user a username. And I'm going to say Fred Flintstone. That's probably how you spell Flintstone. Okay. So now I can just say new user.save before every single one so that we have Fred Flintstone available to us. Okay, and then just like with every single Mongoose callback that you get, what are the two parameters, two arguments that will be fed to our save function, our callback here after we save the new user? So what does the callback need to look? So we have an error, right, that comes back. You can just call it error. And then what's the second? So the saved user, right? So that the actual document that was written to the database itself comes back from Mongoose to us. That's why we're going to be using done all over the place, because we're doing a bunch of asynchronous stuff. Like we're performing operations on a database now, trying to test our code, run it over our API. So that's why we're going to be using that done function. Okay. Now, so we're going to say saved user. I like the terminology. It's Tish. Okay, and then if our error exists, what do we want to do? Well, I just want to simply, since this is a testing environment, I'm just going to console.log the error. Okay, and then I'm going to call done, so we can move on to the next thing. Right? Simple as that. And since we're in this block, we'll probably need to, well, wonder if I can just return done and it's going to move on to that next piece. We'll go for it there. Otherwise, what I want to do is I want to hold a reference to the user that we saved. Now, what do we get back from Mongo that is a unique reference to a document? What do we have? Underscore ID, right? So I can simply say new user gets, it becomes the saved user's underscore ID, right? Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what it does. And then we'll call done. I'm just guessing at this point, and then we'll be able to use this. We'll say user ID up here. That's what I really want, because we're gonna have to use that user ID later on in our application. So we're gonna have to use that in our test suite, right? Okay. Wow, lots of stuff. Okay, so that's our before each hook. Every single time we call it, run a before each hook to go and save a new user to the database by the name of Fred Flintstone. If that user is saved, we should be able to get the user ID, save it as a user ID, and then move on, okay? And then call done. Just all that did there. Okay, so now somebody mentioned after each. Pratik said we have before and after. So now what we need to do is we need to wipe our database clean after every single call. So after we get to a point where we have done into our test, then we have done through our test, the next time done finishes that test, it'll know to done over to after each. And that's what's super cool about this. Normally your code will run top to bottom. It'll just be a synchronous code, you know, that you're writing. Like if you're writing like a quick algorithm, you know, like a little test or something, and you don't have to call anything to the server. You don't have any like asynchronous code going on. You're not gonna have to worry about like handling those asynchronous calls, okay? So I'm gonna say now, this gets a callback just like our friend above, our before each friend. And then we just need to what? We need to clear our database. So I need to say user.remove and then just wipe it all, right? So just clear everything back to a new beginning, okay? And then we can pass this another callback. So this is very familiar. You already know Mongo, and because of that, you can use this like testing instance to start basically testing your data. You can use the schema that we created. We can save stuff to it, set stuff. We can pull stuff out of it, test it. You know, it's going to be awesome. And then, but we need to clear it. So you already know this. So just like above, we have an error and some sort of response, right? In this case, I don't even know what the response is going to be. My guess is it's just all we care about is an error. And if there is an error, then that's what we could, yeah, we can just do that. So if there is an error, we'll just log it. We'll just talk about it, okay? So if error console.log error, and then, so I'm just gonna take this and duplicate it. Cool. Don't call me a cheater. All right. Before each, after each, every single time we call it, they're gonna run, they're gonna operate, they're gonna do their thing. And after it is done, we done over to this piece right here. So done, you can think of done as its own middleware, right? It's just its own function that'll get called as we tell it to, okay? It's a little shaky. It's kind of hard to like really understand. Done. Okay, so let's look at an example of a post. I feel like I've been talking a lot for a while, and I feel like a bunch of you got posts done. You were able to finish it. Well, at least the ones that I jumped in that call with earlier. So does somebody maybe want to walk me through how I'm going to save a user to my database? So first off, I'm going to abstract this out, and I'm going to say Fred. All right, so how do I get my post up and running? Is anybody brave enough to like walk me through this, or should we just... Okay, what I'll do... Oh, sorry?
I'll do it.
Cool.
All right. So and then we should, I don't know, create a new client, I guess.
We'll call them users since...
Or yeah, user, right. We're not doing client, right?
Cool.
And then we're going to do our callback, and then done. And then within that, we need to call the chai.request.
We can use this done here. Okay, so call chai.
Okay, so we need to either have done in the describe or in the it. So it doesn't matter. Then is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's my guess. If we're gonna require it here, we don't need it. And this could like muddy the waters if we're using it in both places. So. Oh,
okay. All right. Well, sounds good. So chai.request and server.
Oh, request. Okay. And then pass it the server, right? So we're gonna request to our server that we pulled in. And we can do that because we called module.exports and exported out our server, which is really good practices. Cool. All right.
All right, and then we're going to want to call our route. And so in this case, we're going to want to post.
Okay. Do I just do that like this?
Yeah, .post, and then in quotes /users.
Okay.
And then next line, we're going to want to send something. So .send invoked, and then we're going to put in our object that we're trying to send. So Fred.
Make sure that we have access to it in this scope. Looks like we do.
And I think we don't want a semicolon right there, right?
Okay.
Because then we want to call .end.
Okay. And what does .end do? Does anyone? We can look at it right here. So not very helpful. Let's see. Yeah. And let's just say that it's basically, since we're mocking this API call, since we're, basically posting the user, we're sending Fred, right? It's just going to say, okay, once we've done our dirty work, we're going to be able to like move on from there. Cool. And here's the thing. I'm trying to think if I don't want to, so let's do this. Let's say we're going to use Fred in our before each hook, and then we're going to use Barney in our tests, because I want the data that I'm working with like as a setter piece, I want it to be different than what's getting saved right here, right? And so that's just kind of how it's going to be. So, okay, so let me just kind of show you what this is all going to do. So username, Barney Rubble, okay? And it's going to be a little bit more simple than the way that I am attempting to try and describe it. But essentially what we're going to do is by doing this, we're saying, hey, pull in our server and then run the logic there in our server in order to, and I actually want to use Barney here, okay? So run the logic over there in our server and pull that logic in here essentially and use that logic to mock out what should happen. So by the time it calls .end, .send has already done its magic, which exists here, right? So the logic for all this is happening here. We're basically be able to piggyback off that logic with a clean instance database set. So our test is going to be just like a fake data, right? Okay. All right, that may have just caused a lot of people confusion, but it's okay because this is not like super duper easy stuff, okay? All right, so moving on, what do we need to do with our end function here?
So with end, we can have an error and a response.
Okay.
And then we can do a callback. And then we can do some error handling. So if we get an error, then we're going to then done. And we were passing error into our done. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's what we were doing. So, but then done here, right?
Right. Okay. So, and this is where, so if I were to call done as soon as an error handled, then we're never ever going to hit any of our testing, right? So if I were to call done at this point, what needs to happen, we just need to know about the error. So we actually probably don't need done at this point. But what we can do is we can just we can return a console log since it's a function. And then we can just say, hey, there's an error saving user to database or something. And then we want to know about that error. And that's going to come back from Mongoose itself, right? And then we can operate the rest of our logic. So this is where we can write our tests. So write tests to check if what was saved, blah, 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 blah. And then after everything's said and done, we'd call done. So then it'll move on to the next thing, right? So you probably could get away with calling done there in your, error block, but I don't feel like it's necessary. We would probably just want to call it here so that we actually continue to operate our test, because done is basically going to skip out to the next piece. So, okay, so if Ben wrote it something like return done with the error, then I'd love to get to know exactly his ideas. So why not done versus end? So done here. So I believe end comes from chai, and done just comes from, I guess it's coming from Mocha done. End comes from Mocha as well. Oh no, it's chai HTTP request. So end is a specific method that comes from the middleware that we're using, Bob. And then done comes from Mocha itself to just like continue to perform asynchronous operations as we hit like a certain spot. So I'm just going to try this. I'm going to try this my way. If it doesn't work, we can come back to it and you guys can yell at me, which we only have 9 more minutes left. So, and we're like a third of the way done with everything that we need to get through. So, okay. And then what are we going to expect here then? So the first thing that I want to do with my expects, by the way, thank you. I believe that was Matt, right? Thank you, Matt. I'm gonna look at our status. So I'm gonna say if our response.status is equal to, we're gonna spec that to equal 200, right? If everything's good to go, then we should be awesome. Okay, and then otherwise, our response, because this is gonna be the response that comes back from the server, right? Thank you for the documentation help. We can say expect response dot username to equal Barney dot username. Just compare one object to another, because this is a new object, right? Saved to the database, so we get response back, comes back. Oh, cool. Awesome. Done also accepts an error parameter when signaling completion. That's great. So yeah, you could potentially do something like call it done here and then give it your error. I'll bite. White flag, surrender. You guys got me. Cool. All right, so now if we were to run our test suite, awesome. We have two things failing. Oh, that's good. Oh, crap. Okay, so let me move this. Say mongoose dot promise gets our global dot promise. Cool. And then let me do the same thing where we're connecting. So Mongoose is so smart that it created a promise library that nobody loves. And so it's like, hey, here's a deprecation warning. You should do something that's not us, okay? Okay, so awesome. We're actually failing our before and after each hooks, which means, oh, carrier property ID I'm gonna find. Let's test that. Let's look at it. Let's look at our each, before each, because those are just saving to the database, so they're not interfering with our stuff yet. So let me look at this. Console.log. Is it, okay. Oh, wait. That's my bad. I think I found the error. Cool. All right. Fred Flintstone, okay. Assignment to constant variable. I wonder why I did that. Okay, so where's the constant variable that I'm assigning to? Const new user, and then I'm saying, oh, derp. You guys not helping me out here. Okay. Cool, we got rid of those. Oh wait, did we? Before each hooks, okay. Should create a new user after each hook for, oh, I need to remove, do I need to remove by ID? No, I can just remove, drop the whole table. Let's see. Oh, otherwise done. Derp. Cool. Awesome. Okay, now our before each and our after each are working as needed. So not a round of applause for that one. I feel okay about it. Only a couple of bugs. So the first bug was all this mess. I was trying to assign to new user, but that was wrong. I need to assign user ID. And then I also was not terminating, and it took, because of that, we were hanging up, and then we got that error that's like, you're doing things wrong. Okay. So, okay. So this is good. We have a failing test. Failing tests are good. We want to make sure that we write our test to fail first, and then we go and we actually get them to pass. And that's test driven. Okay. So now what we would do is we would go and we would create our API to actually take in our request body and save it and everything. So we'd want to make sure we get the logic built out for our post. Okay. So you could do that, or you can continue your test suite and move forward. But right now we're actually getting to these lines where we have so look, and that is coming from Morgan. So this is good. This is awesome. Stuff that I have never used until right now. Morgan. Okay, so let's see what it's giving us. Okay, so this is a timestamp of when this happened. The API of where it happened, the method that was used, and then just the package that was used to test it. Okay. And then, okay, expected undefined to equal Barney Rubble. That's good, right? Because we're trying to, okay. So now if we were to run over to our server and create our actual post request, let's just get this one test to pass. And then first thing we do tomorrow evening, we'll make sure we have, all of this stuff set up properly. So first thing I want to do is make sure that we send back a positive response. We're going to do our save. We're going to do everything right here. So what I'm going to say is const username, pull it out of rec.body, and I'm going to say const new user equals new user, and whoa, come on now. And then pass it our new username, okay? And then I'm going to say new user.save, and then give it our callback. Error, new user, no, saved user, right? Okay, if there's an error, we need to know about it. So we'll say response.status 422.send error. And then I probably want to put this in a full block because I want to return. I just like to terminate manually. I don't trust sometimes .send or .json, whatever. Otherwise, we're going to send back some sort of send our saved user. And that's going to send with it this send object, or this send method is going to send with it a 200 at this point. So let's see. Whoops. User's not defined. Got to pull in user. Cannot find module. Well, duh. It's because it's not an NPM module. Okay. Obviously have some sort of problem with my test, and I'm going to have to just debug it, and then we'll pick up right here tomorrow evening since we're a little bit later. Cool. Awesome. I'll debug this and I'll figure it all out, and we'll figure out why it's hitting it and mocking it and it's not completely good. So yeah, guys, don't feel bad if you didn't get like even this far on the sprint. If you were just able to like get some documentation down, if you're able to like mock up an API, you do have a new sprint for tomorrow, but we can actually, since we can actually make sure that you have plenty of time. This was just a really big one, and there's a lot of things that I think are very important to go over. So I wanted to make sure you saw like a good working example of some of this stuff. Your sprint for tomorrow, I believe we start into React Native. So I'll be with you tomorrow. So, and then you'll be able to get all day or tomorrow. I'll try only spend like the first 30 minutes of class on this tomorrow, and then we'll move right into React Native afterwards, if that's cool. Okay, guys, thank you for putting up with me. This is stuff that I've never had to, in my career, test an API before myself. I've always had to test front-end code, React components, a bunch of other stuff, but I've never had to, actually come in and write tests. So this is really fun and really informative. It's fun to learn alongside you guys, as well as be able to like explain just from my experience, like the things that I do know. So thanks for bearing with me. And, we got maybe a third of the way done with everything, and we'll see how far we can take it. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll get this recording up tonight, though, so you guys can have access to it. Okay, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow evening. Have a good day.